When I was a kid, my grandmother lived in this incredibly old house. You know the type, right? The kind where the floors creak in just the right way, the shadows in the corners seem a little too dark, and the whole place has this dot dot feeling. It's a house that feels unsettling even when absolutely nothing strange is happening. It just has this weight of history to it. And my story adds just a little more weight to that history. This happened when I was about 6 years old. I was a pretty fearless kid, or at least I thought I was. I'd spend weekends at my grandmother's house, exploring every nook and cranny. It was my own personal adventure playground. On this particular weekend, it was a hot summer day, and I got a craving for a soda. My grandma was one of those people who bought everything in bulk, so all the extra drinks were kept downstairs in the basement. Now, this wasn't just any basement. It was one of those old, unfinished basements with a damp, earthy smell, stone walls, and a single, bare light bulb hanging from a wire that cast long, dancing shadows. And tucked away in the corner of this already creepy basement was an even creepier little room. It was a cold room, or a root cellar, what people used to use before refrigerators to keep food cool. The door was made of thick, heavy wood with an old-fashioned skeleton keyhole. So, being a thirsty 6-year-old, I wasn't thinking about any of this. All I wanted was a cold drink. I skipped down the creaky wooden stairs, the single light bulb swinging slightly and making the shadows move. I remember the cool, damp air hitting my face as I got to the bottom. I walked over to the cold room, grabbed the old, cold metal latch, and pulled the heavy door open. I was expecting to see shelves stacked with dusty jars of preserves, maybe some potatoes in a wooden crate, and of course, the case of soda I was looking for. But that's not what I saw. Standing just a few feet away from me, in the middle of that small, dark room, was a little girl. She couldn't have been much older than I was. But she was different. Her skin had this strange, pale, almost grayish tint to it. She was wearing a simple, old-fashioned dress that looked torn and faded, like something from a black and white photograph. It was definitely not the kind of clothes a kid in my neighborhood would be wearing. Her hair was dark and messy, and her eyes were just huge and dark in her small face. We just stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Neither of us moved. We just stared at each other. My brain was trying to process what I was seeing. Was she a cousin I'd never met? A neighbor's kid who had wandered in? But none of it made sense. How did she get in there? The door was closed, and there was this intense, profound silence in the air, a silence that felt heavier than just a lack of noise. The initial confusion quickly turned into pure, cold terror. Every instinct in my tiny 6-year-old body screamed at me to get out. My heart felt like it was going to pound its way out of my chest. I didn't scream, I didn't even breathe, I just reacted. I slammed that heavy wooden door shut with all my might. The sound echoed through the basement, a loud, definitive bang. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the cold stone wall on the other side of the basement. My heart was a drum solo in my ears. I was terrified, but I was also curious. My kid brain couldn't just leave it alone. I had to know if what I saw was real. Against my better judgment, I crept back towards the door. The only way to see inside without opening it was the old, oversized skeleton keyhole. I crouched down, my hands trembling. I told myself I was just going to take a quick peek to prove to myself that it was just my imagination, that the room was empty. I leaned forward, closed one eye, and pressed the other one right up to the cold, metallic keyhole. And what I saw burned itself into my memory forever. There was an eye, staring right back at me. Her eye pressed up against the other side of the keyhole, looking directly into mine. It was dark and wide, and in that tiny frame view, it filled my entire world. We were separated by nothing but an inch of old wood. The shock was so visceral, so absolute. I felt like I'd been electrocuted. I scrambled backward, falling onto the dusty concrete floor. This time, I did scream. I crab walked backward as fast as I could, never taking my eyes off that door, fully expecting it to swing open at any second. I got to the stairs, turned, and bolted up them, not stopping until I burst into the kitchen where my grandmother was. I was hysterical, crying, and trying to explain what I saw. There's a girl in the basement, in the cold room. Of course, being a grown-up, she tried to calm me down. She said it was just my imagination, that the old house was playing tricks on me. She even went down to the basement herself, opened the cold room door, and showed me that it was empty. Just shelves, jars, and dust, no girl. No sign that anyone had been there at all. But I knew what I saw. I knew it was real. For the rest of the day, I refused to be alone. I stuck to my grandma's side like glue. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her eye in the keyhole, staring back at me. I never told anyone else about it for years. I figured no one would believe me, just like my grandma didn't. I tried to convince myself it was just a bad dream, a product of an overactive imagination in a creepy old house. But the memory was too vivid, too real. It wasn't until I was in my late teens that I finally mentioned it. We were at a family gathering, and for some reason, we started talking about my grandma's old house. I was sitting with my aunt, my mom's sister, who had grown up in that house. On a whim, I decided to tell her. I described the whole thing, the cold room, the pale girl, the old dress, and the terrifying moment with the keyhole. I expected her to laugh or dismiss it, just like my grandma had. But she didn't. She didn't even look surprised. She just got this very calm, serious look on her face, and she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear her, "Oh, you saw the girl too?" My blood ran cold. "What?" I asked. She nodded. I used to see her all the time when I was a little girl living there. In the basement, on the stairs, sometimes just a glimpse of her in a hallway. I told my parents, your grandparents, but they never believed me. They always said I was just making up stories. Hearing her say that was one of the most validating and terrifying moments of my life. I wasn't crazy. It wasn't just my imagination. Someone else, my own aunt, had seen the exact same girl in the exact same house. We spent the next hour sharing our stories, the details matching up perfectly. It turns out we weren't the only ones either. Over the years, other cousins and family friends who had spent time in the house had their own little stories, strange noises, and fleeting glimpses of something that shouldn't be there. I'm 34 years old now, and that memory is just as crystal clear as the day it happened. I can still feel the cold of the keyhole against my eye, the shock of seeing her staring back. It's a story I've told a few times, and it always gives people chills. My grandmother has since passed away, and the house was sold, but I sometimes wonder if the little girl is still there, waiting in the cold room. And just for the record, I never did go back for that soda. And to this day, I have a very real, very understandable aversion to old basements and doors with keyholes. Thanks for listening to my story. If you have any creepy experiences of your own, I'd love to read about them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more strange tales. See you next time.